Part 128. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1271. Manbao brought this car of flowers and plants home, and then began to divide the plants for Keek to record. When Bai Shan and the others came back from playing, Manbao was squatting on the edge of the flower pot to fill in the spilled soil. Go back. Bai Shan looked around and asked, "You just leave these things like that?" Manbao said, "They are all dug outdoors. Since they were able to survive the winter before, of course they can now. I'll find some straw or wheat straw to cover them and barely keep them warm." Manbao clapped the mud on his hands and asked, "What are you doing?" "Riding," Bai Shan said. "We went to the eastern suburbs for a horse run." Manbao's eyes brightened, and he asked enthusiastically, "How do you feel?" "It's cold," Bai Shan said. "We decided not to ride before spring, and we don't recommend you ride. It's too cold." Bai Erlang also asked her to look at his face. "How about it, is it cracked?" "The wind is like a knife. I regretted it as soon as the green ear ran, but it liked it very much, so I didn't want to interrupt it suddenly." "Manbao, what about my Chiji?" "Don't worry, it also ran around, it's happy now." Bai Shan helped put the flower pot in place, and then asked, "This is all from the prince?" Manbao nodded. "The crown princess led me to pick them. Don't tell me, they are quite generous." Bai Erlang still can't understand why she likes flowers and plants so much. He looked around and found that there was no one he knew. Bai Shan said, "Let's go, it's time for lunch." After lunch, Manbao went to give Xiang Mingxiu some painkillers. This time, she changed a different acupuncture method, and the effect was not as good as the previous one. Research. Mr. Mo is still doing research on the two anesthetic prescriptions, and the two have maintained a frequency of at least 1 hour of communication at night. On the other hand, Thursday Lang was not in a hurry to meet the chief shopkeeper of Ji Shitang. He went back home in the middle, called the third son, and they went out and wandered around. Of course, it's not just wandering around aimlessly. Wu Lang is with them. Because of the need to buy ingredients for the restaurant, Wu Lang knew a lot of people, and also knew what places were selling what and what the prices were. Wu Lang took Shirulang around today, and when Manbao came out of the room, Shirulang and the others hadn't come back yet. He asked someone to come back and spread the word, saying that they would not eat at home at night, but would eat at home. Eat in a restaurant. After Thursday Lang asked Saturday Lang for his opinion, he went to the old Manchu next door to have a drink and reached a relevant intention at the wine table. So the matter was put on hold for the time being. But neither side stopped Saturday Lang and Chiu Paniang from interacting. The old Manchu felt that he was reluctant to let his children get in the way of the wolf, and Thursday Lang felt that it was enough for Saturday Lang to marry a wife when he was old. So the two families were happy, and the atmosphere was fairly harmonious, and the matter was settled. Saturday Lang didn't know much about this, because he was busy in the back kitchen, and Friday Lang had promised to add 2 more helpers to the back kitchen. Of course, there is no such thing as a cook. It has to be carefully selected to choose the right one. In addition to posting announcements outside the door, he also plans to walk around in the past 2 days to see if he can find a cook with a better character. It would be nice to dig people over then. Everyone seems to be very busy. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang are about to have their end-of-year exams. Although it is Xiu Mu, they are too busy. The evidence is that when Manbao locked himself in the house to study medicine, the two stayed in the study and worked hard, and did not come to find her to go out to play. Whether it is a restaurant or Changqing Lane, although it is busy, it is calm, but it is not very peaceful outside. Yesterday, the third prince left Beijing with his family, and today the East Palace summoned Zhou Man to the palace to see a doctor. And Zhou Manhui's treatment of infertility has been known all over the capital, and the meaning of Donggong is the most obvious. The faction of the 3 princes, who had been hit hard because the third prince was a vassal, was dealt another round of blows. Why did they follow the third prince? The second is naturally because the emperor loves the third prince very much, but what about the first? The most important thing is that the prince has no children. If the prince has a son, just assuming that they have seen the end of their future. As the saying goes, cutting someone's future is like killing one's parents, and Zhou Man's eyes are now similar to killing one's father and enemy. So when Man Bao was still studying medicine in Liu, some rumors passed through the queen's defense and reached the queen mother's ears. When the queen received the news and wanted to stop it, it was already a step too late. Aunt Chang was a little worried and asked, "Miss, what should I do?" The queen was not worried. She thought for a moment and said, "It doesn't matter, take a look first, the queen mother will put the country first." Aunt Chang, then tomorrow. Tomorrow, you will personally bring someone to pick up Zhou Man into the palace, first go to the East Palace and then bring me here, the queen said softly. Tell Zhou Man that she only treats her illness, and she doesn't need to worry about the rest. But the next day, Aunt Chang didn't have a chance to say these words, because Zhou Man didn't know anything. When she went to Jishitang to pick up people, she said goodbye to the shopkeeper Zhengda and others with a happy face. Don't know yet. Aunt Chang thought for a while, and felt that since she didn't know, there was no need to tell her to worry about it, so Man Bao went directly to the East Palace to see a doctor for the crown prince. The emperor obviously knew that the prince was receiving treatment, and he didn't know how he knew that the prince didn't sleep well at night. He began to reduce the prince's workload today so that he had enough time to sleep. After watching the prince, Man Bao had lunch in the East Palace, and then moved to the Taiji Palace. By the time she was sent out of the palace, it was already Shenxi. The carriage in the palace took her home. It was safe and sound all the way, not only this day, but for the next few days. The blue and black eyes in the prince's eyes gradually disappeared, and his spirit was also full, and his temper was not so great. At least when he was scolded by someone pointing his nose, he would not go back in a rage, nor would he privately scold him. Appeal to the emperor. Although his face was still very ugly, when he stood there quietly, he looked a bit calm from a few years ago. Wei Ji and the others didn't say anything, but they were somewhat satisfied in their hearts, so they didn't look like they were. I used to find fault with the prince like that. Some people saw that the queen mother didn't respond at all, so they couldn't help but get anxious and started to work harder in the harem. In a fit of anger, the queen rectified a group of palace servants, and the harem fell silent again. She never strictly guards the harem, but that doesn't mean she has nothing to do. See you at 6 p.m. I have a cold and I'm very sleepy, so I'll go to sleep first. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1272. The emperor's harem has always been stable. First, the emperor respects the queen, and no one in the harem can go past the queen. Second, the queen is virtuous, and she is very kind to the concubines in the harem, even the concubines left by the previous emperor, so there is no previous court in the palace. So much intrigue. After the queen dealt with a group of palace servants, the maids in the queen mother's palace were much more honest, and even walking was 2 points lighter than usual. A palace maid carefully went in with a bowl of medicine, and after testing the temperature, she respectfully handed it to the Princess Yunfan, who then brought it to the queen mother. The queen mother drank half a bowl in her hand and shook her head. The princess of Yizhu, who was beside her, immediately poured water and rinsed her mouth. The queen mother pressed down the bitterness on the tip of her tongue and waved her hand. Okay, you can rest, just let the palace servants come to these things. The princess of Yizhu said softly, let Yunfan accompany you to talk, so that you won't be bored. The imperial doctor said, you should relax and worry less. The queen mother smiled, as long as you are all safe, I have nothing to worry about. I'm bored here, don't hold Yunfan, let her play in the garden. I'm not going. Yunfan County Master turned slightly. The Empress Dowager asked with a smile, who is this who made you angry? Tell the grandmother now. Princess Yizhu's expression changed, so she wanted to stop Princess Yunfan, but Princess Yunfan was faster than her, and opened her mouth and said, Grandmother, some of the palace servants who used to serve me were transferred away by the queen, and now they are assigned. I don't know anyone who comes to me, so I don't want to go to the garden with them to play. Yunfan, Princess Yizhu gave her a warning glance and said to the Queen Mother, Mother, I blame me for spoiling Yunfan. The palace servants around her are dishonest and will only instigate her to commit crimes, so the Queen Mother transfer those people away. They didn't instigate me, Yunfan County Master replied to his mother first, and then said to the silent Queen Mother, Grandmother, you don't know that Zhou man, who harmed my father, is now coming to the palace in an open and honest manner. They are all hiding from you, the queen, she. Okay, the Queen Mother suddenly interrupted her and said with a smile, isn't it just a few palace servants? It's not a big deal, you can't use them, then send a few people from my side to serve you. You and them familiar, you should get used to it. This is not what Yunfan County said at all. Seeing the Queen Mother and Shimu, she couldn't help but get anxious, but Zhou man, oops. Princess Yizhu stretched out her hand and pinched her quietly. Princess Yunfan finally stopped talking. The Queen Mother raised her eyelids and glanced at her, and asked, what's wrong? Yunfan County Lord's face changed several times, and finally said, it's okay. The Queen Mother nodded with a smile, it's fine, you guys can go back. Now Zinking should also go to school, he is young, you should take more care of him, don't let him be naughty outside. Princess Yizhu took the lead in answering, pulling Yunfan County Master to retire. When the mother and daughter left, the Queen Mother sighed and leaned back on the pillow to think. A big palace maid quietly stepped forward and raised the pillow for her to make her more comfortable. The Queen Mother asked, is the palace still in chaos? The Queen has done some rectification, and they are much more honest. Killed? No, most of them were sent to Huangzhuang to farm. The Queen Mother snorted coldly, the Queen is too soft-hearted, and a group of people who eat inside and outside, and just 3 or 4 things should all be killed. The Empress Dowager said angrily, Wulang is also the one who instigated the bad, the Emperor should put all these people in a nest, and see what they are still jumping about. The maid in the palace lowered her head, and the Queen Mother was so angry that she could not help coughing, and she hurriedly offered her water to drink. The Queen Mother suppressed the itch in her throat and asked, how is the person I asked you to find? The big palace maid quickly said, I'm still looking for it. The few I've been looking for recently are not very satisfactory. Although the family is well off, it's one level worse, and it's not easy to aggrieve the Yunfan County Master. The Queen Mother frowned and asked, bring it to me to see what kind of people they are. The palace maid hurriedly went to find the booklet and presented it. After the Queen Mother turned over, her brows became even tighter, it's all inappropriate, you don't need the capital and Yangzhou, you can ask someone to check the small aristocratic families in Jiaodong area, or some small nobles. In the future, Zinking will go to Dizhu. Fan, they can take care of each other when they are close to each other. The big palace maid responded, and said a little nervously, I'm afraid that Yunfan County Master will not agree. Previously, the prince and Yunfan County Master favored the Lanja Wang family, and the Wang family is also a bit interesting. Empress Dowager, this time is different from the past. Is the Wang family still willing? The maid did not speak. The Queen Mother said, that's it, the family is lower, Yunfan is more confident, she is still a little temperamental, and the family she is looking for is as far away from Beijing as possible. The maid of honor should come down. After being silent for a while, the Queen Mother asked, how is the prince's body? The slave maid met yesterday when I went to deliver things to the crown princess, and her complexion has indeed improved a lot. I heard that now I don't drink for dinner, I can eat 3 bowls of rice, and I rarely lose my temper in the martial arts field. The Queen Mother was silent for a long time, and finally closed her eyes and sighed, "Forget it, let them go." The maid of the palace knew that the Queen Mother did not intend to pursue the matter of Zhou Man and Bai Shan's lawsuit against the imperial court. The king of Yizhu has already gone to earth, and it has been nearly a month. The tears that should be shed, and the pain that should be painful, are always more important than the dead. The big palace maid quietly retreated, and went to find a suitable husband for Yunfan County Master again. Princess Yizhu pulled Yunfan County Master back to the house, and as soon as she entered the door, she asked her confidant to close the door. She turned around and slapped Yunfan County Master in the face. Yunfan County Master was stunned, covered his face and looked at Princess Yizhu in disbelief. "Mother, you beat me." Princess Yizhu asked angrily, "Who told you to ask Zhou Man before the Queen Mother? Why can't I mention it? It was her who killed the king." Princess Yizhu was so angry that she slapped her again and roared, "Shut up." She said, "Why don't you have a little brain? She is treating the prince now, what are you doing to provoke her? She also treated the queen before, aren't we afraid?" Yunfan County Master said, "When she sneaked into the palace to see the queen, she should have been beaten out, because we didn't do anything. This is how I have to go in and out, and now she has entered the palace in an upright manner. If you don't talk about her, you still come to beat me, or you still my mother-in-law." Princess Yizhu felt dizzy, she supported the table and sat on the chair. She covered her aching brain and said, "Why don't you understand? It's different now, the queen's illness, Xiao Yuanzheng may also be able to, but the crown prince's illness, now only Shi Zhou Man can cure it. And the crown prince is the capital of the country, he is more important than the queen, do you know that? See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1273. Princess Yunfan didn't know, so she was stunned. Princess Yizhu could only break it up and say, "At this time, no one can move Zhou Man, the emperor will not allow it, the queen will not allow it, the prince and the princess will not allow it, and even the queen mother will not agree." Why? The prince is also the grandson of the queen mother, or the eldest grandson. He is the national capital, do you know that? Princess Yizhu couldn't help but patted the table and said, "Even those ministers in the court will not let Zhou Man have any trouble. Otherwise, why do those people exert force towards the queen mother, but there is no movement at all outside? They want to use the queen mother and us as knives. The queen mother can see it clearly, how can you push it up?" Yunfan County Master covered his cheeks and asked, "So that's the end of the father's revenge?" Princess Yizhu wiped away her tears and said, "No, do you want to fill in your brother's life? They are using you as a knife, who knows who is hiding behind? You can't argue wiser." Yunfan County Master's face turned pale, and he pursed his lips tightly and did not speak. Princess Yizhu slowed her tone and said, "Yunfan, your father has done something wrong. In the future, you and Xingqing will rely on the queen mother. If the queen mother is good, we will be fine, so don't bother the queen mother with these things." She said, "You and Xingqing are the grandchildren of the queen mother, and so is the crown prince." Although Princess Yizhu also hated Zhou Man and Bai Shan, she had long known that they were different now, and no matter how much they hated them, they couldn't do anything. You even have to avoid them a little bit, otherwise, who knows when the emperor and the crown prince think of the prince's treason and will they blame them again? Yunfan County Lord cried out in grievance, but there was nothing he could do. Now they still live in the queen mother's palace, because the queen mother is ill, they have to serve here. But the scope of activities is only in the palace where the queen mother lives. Not only her mother concubine, but the queen mother also forbids them to go out. She just wants to do something and can't do anything. The palace was quiet and nothing happened. Man Bao changed the plan for the prince, starting from daily acupuncture to every other day, and slightly changed the acupuncture method. Man Bao finally had some free time when he was full, and at this time, they also took a break. Lu Huan invited them to roast venison at home. Besides them, he also invited Feng Zonping. Man Bao had never eaten venison at such a young age. Of course, Bai Shan and Bai Erlang had not eaten either, so the three of them were very excited before going to bed. Man Bao even asked Keek if their encyclopedia had recorded them. There are deer. Of course not, but the entry for deer in the encyclopedia contains pictures handed down from ancient times. Man Bao looked at the picture and swallowed, then asked, "Can venison be included?" Keek, "No, host, the creatures you include must be alive." Man Bao, "Okay." The three of them were full of anticipation, and then slept in the warm blanket the next day. After they were dressed, they opened the window a crack to breathe and glimpsed the snow white outside. Man Bao was stunned for a moment, opened the window to look, and saw that the yard was covered with a thick layer of snow. She was stunned for a moment and then rushed out of the room with a wow. Bai Shan also woke up. He also saw the snow in the yard. He was also very excited. The two jumped into the snow. There should have been a lot of snow last night. When they stepped on it, the snow was almost covered. Feet up. It was the first time that the two of them had grown up to see such heavy snow. The first snow in the capital had already fallen, but the snow was not big. They thought the snow here was the same as what they saw in Kilai village when they were children. Same thing, now look at. Man Bao directly grabbed a handful of snow on the ground. It was cold and cold. She clumsily pressed it into a ball while screaming, and then hit Bai Shan. Bai Shan was smashed on the head, and he also reached out to Tuangxiu and smashed it, and the two of them laughed out loud in the yard. Bai Erlang was woken up and came out wearing his clothes, only to stand still when he was hit head-on by two snowballs. He was so drowsy that he completely flew away, looking at the two people who were still trying to make snow. Finally, when the two of them raised their heads, they finally came back to their senses. He turned his back with a wow sound, and the snowball hit his back and spread out. He also rushed to the yard to fight back with the snowball. The three of them scuffled instantly. Mr. Zhuang was quarreling with the three of them, but he didn't stop them. Xiang Mingxiu pushed the bed away and looked at the three of them. He couldn't help but smile. Mr. Zhuang waited for them to get into trouble, and then said, "Okay, hurry up and wash up, and be careful to get your clothes wet and catch a cold." It was only then that the three of them reacted. They hadn't washed their faces and combed their hair yet. After cleaning up, they actively took the broom to sweep the snow. It was the first time they swept snow when they were so old, so they not only swept the snow in the yard and garden, but also took the broom and went out to sweep the snow in the alley. It was Daji who reminded them that the appointment time with Lu Huan had come, and they reluctantly put their hands away, otherwise, they would be able to sweep into the street. The three of them were sweating lightly, and deliberately stepped on the snow under the corner of the wall to crunch home. Only then did they change their clothes and go to Liu's house. Or they just arrived and were about to go to the door when they saw the Bai family's carriage and stopped to wait for them. A few people went in together. Lu Huan came out to greet them, because it was his little friends who came, so he took them directly to his yard. "My grandfather is also at home, but he said that the garden is for us today, and we can play as long as we don't just tear down the house." Feng Zonping asked, "Didn't your eldest brother go to Yizhu? Where did the venison come from?" Lu Huan said proudly, "Big brother Li and the others gave it. Although my big brother is not in Beijing, they know that I like to eat, so they specially sent me a half fan after beating the deer. We can just bake it in the garden and eat it." Yi Xiang smiled and said, "It's also luck. There was such a heavy snowfall last night, so I can enjoy the snow while eating meat." Man Bao turned his head to Yin He and said, "You can't eat more." Yin had already been prepared, nodded, and said, "I know, I'll eat a little, and then watch you eat." The servants of the Lu family set up a shelf in the pavilion, and the charcoal fire was also lit. Several people sat around the brazier, but it was not cold. The snow on the garden path has been swept away, but the snow in other places has not moved. Looking at it, it is plain white, which is particularly beautiful. Man Bao couldn't help but sigh, "It's so beautiful. If 100 flowers bloom again at this time, and there are flowers, plants, and trees of various colors in the white snow, it must be even more beautiful. Everyone, in the winter, where do all the flowers bloom?" The servant brought the marinated venison, and Lu Huan had to bake it by himself. Bai Shan didn't trust his craftsmanship very much. "Can you bake it?" "No, this is just a pleasure to eat." "That won't work," Man Bao said, "I want them to bake. It's the first time I've eaten venison. If you don't bake it well, wouldn't you be blind to such good meat?" Bai Shan and Bai Erlang nodded together. "That's right. They have always been self-aware. I'm a little uncomfortable today, so I won't update it. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1274. The servant put the marinated venison on the iron plate, and turned it over and over again and again, and the aroma diffused in a moment. Lu Huan, who insisted on roasting the meat by himself, saw it and immediately dropped his own pieces of meat. "Also sit back and wait to eat." Feng Zonping and Yi Xiang despised him for a while and continued their actions. They obviously do things like this a lot, and their craftsmanship is much better than Lu Huan. The two servants stood aside to help them roast the meat, and served it to them on a plate. The three of them carefully took a sip, then their eyes brightened, and they rolled the rest into their mouths. Lu Huan was content. "How is it?" "It's delicious, right?" The three nodded together, and Man Bao said, "It doesn't have the mutton of sheep, it's more tender than beef, and the meat is tight. It's really delicious." Yin He smiled and said, "If you like it, if my father hunts deer after a while, I will have someone send some to you." Bai Shan asked curiously, "Is that a wild deer hunted in the mountains or raised in a hunting ground?" Yin He said, "There are both, but the wild deer in the mountains are not easy to hunt, and it is snowing again at this time, and the wild mountains are dangerous, so they usually go to the hunting grounds to hunt." Feng Zonping said, "Even the hunting grounds are not good for hunting. The people at Sinong Temple are very tired of the mountains and forests every year. They put some cubs in the hunting grounds or feed some food. Sometimes we go in and hunt some good prey, they still have to take it. They say they want to breed, but who knows how many actually take it for breeding." Yi Xiang's opinion was also very big. "Last time we went in to hunt a roe deer, they stunned that it was a female roe deer and was pregnant, so they took it away, but Li Yi invited us to his house within 2 days. They said they wanted to stew a roe deer to eat, so we went, and the roe deer looked familiar." When Lu Huan heard this, he couldn't help laughing. Yin or a few others couldn't help laughing, and said, "Sinong Temple will occasionally send some prey to my father, saying that their people got it when they went into the mountains to investigate the hunting grounds." Yi Xiang turned his head to Feng Zonping and said, "Look, I don't care. You, the grandson of the Minister of Punishment, are not comparable to the grandson of the Minister of Officials and the son of Jing Zaiyin." Feng Zonping stepped on him lightly, and scolded with a smile, "Get out of here, it's not that my grandfather and Si Nanking don't get along with you." Bai Shan and the others were curious, "Why don't they get along?" Feng Zonping said with a smile, "It's all about Chen Zhi's rotten millet, and I can't tell why. Anyway, they are not in harmony, but it's all trivial matters. As an official, who doesn't have a few enemies? Don't you have enemies too?" Hearing this, Lu Huan raised his head and said, "Are you talking about Yunfan County Master and Zinking County King?" Man Bao looked up and asked, are they going to seek revenge on us? Feng Zongping and Yin Or have the best information, especially Yin Or, whose father is Jing Zaiyin, and the news in the palace is much faster and more accurate than that of the Minister of Punishment. He said, I heard that the Queen Mother is giving Yunfan County Master looking for a county horse. The Lord of Yunfan County may be married next year. Man Bao said, it's too early, she's just getting married, it's not good for a girl to marry too early. Crowd, isn't this point of concern a little strange? Before Yin Or was about to speak, Man Bao asked again, is there anyone you like? Don't be in the capital or back to Yizhu. We will avoid her and go in the future. Yin Or several people's hearts fell back again, and shook their heads with laughter. Yin Or said, I heard that the Queen Mother wants to find the little nobles in the Jiaodong area. The fief of the King of Xinqing County is in Dizhu, and I guess the Queen Mother also wants to look there, Feng Zongping said with a refreshing look here, and said happily, the Queen Mother asked my grandmother before when the King of Yizhu first entered the capital. As for me, fortunately, my grandfather felt a little wrong when investigating the case of Sujian's fall from a horse, so my grandmother declined. Yixiang, people may not like you. I heard that the palace was originally interested in the Wang family, and that too, so you'd better be careful when you enter the palace recently. Bai Shan and the others were listening with gusto, but he didn't expect him to bring the topic to them, blinking and asking, what does this have to do with us? Of course it has something to do with it, Feng Zongping said, Yunfan County Master is in a bad mood, isn't she afraid that she will trouble you? Bai Shan smiled and said, I'm not really afraid of this. He looked at Man Bao, raised his eyebrows and asked, are you afraid? Man Bao shook his head. Now, she is not brought in and out of the palace by the queen or the crown prince, and basically she will not come into contact with the third person along the way, and everyone is very polite to her. It's okay to be outside the palace, she doesn't believe that the Princess Yunfan can come to trouble her in person in the palace. And Bai Shan can have this confidence, naturally because he saw the sincerity of the queen and the prince. Feng Zongping raised his eyebrows, and was more aware of Zhou Man's importance to the palace now, although he wanted to ask, can the crown prince's illness really be cured? But he swallowed the words again, forcing himself not to ask. Forget it, let his grandfather know that if he asks such a question, he will definitely be cut to death. But it was so sad. Feng Zongping could only find other topics. Senior Tang has returned to Beijing. Didn't you say you were friends with him, why didn't you invite him out for dinner and drinks? The three said together, no time. Feng Zongping sighed and said, that's right, he has entered the punishment department and is already taking over the remaining cases of the King of Yizhu. I guess he is too busy to touch the ground at the moment. The three looked up at him together, then lowered their heads silently, saying that they were not available. I've been so busy lately, how can I have time for a party, if it wasn't for Lu Huan saying that his house has venison. Man Bao and the others had a wonderful day at Lu Huan's house. The venison was really delicious. In less than half a day, several families knew that Zhou Man likes to eat venison, so the Li family and the Han family each sent a deer leg to Changqing Lane. The benefits of Man Bao asked Aunt Rong to keep some, and then divided the rest into two parts, one for early Xiang and one for Wei Vulang and the others. Even the prince knew about it. The next day, when Man Bao entered the palace to see the prince, he asked, do you like venison very much? Man Bao's Hung was afraid that he would also send it, so he quickly said, Your Highness, I already have a lot of venison at home. It is hanging under the eaves and freezing, so don't give it away. The prince nodded slightly, that Gu ate it by himself. Man Bao suggested, you'd better not eat it, wait 2 months before eating it. The prince frowned, can you not even eat venison? That's not true, but venison is aphrodisiac. I'm afraid you will eat it impulsive. Prince. The crown princess who was drinking tea by the side directly sprayed the tea, and hurriedly covered her mouth with a handkerchief and coughed. The prince glared at her, then turned to Zhou Man and said, "Hurry up, you have to go to the mother's harem later. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1275. When Man Bao came out of the palace, he still got a fat deer leg, because it was a reward from the emperor. She didn't see anyone rejecting the reward in the air. In fact, she didn't really want to refuse, she just thought, why do they like to reward deer legs instead of rewarding a deer directly? In the end, Man Bao and Keek could only look at the deer leg and sigh, and then happily carried it back and decided to freeze it and eat it slowly. At this time, it was very cold, and the deer legs were hanging under the porch. It was frozen hard overnight, and it would not break for 10 days and a half months. If you are still afraid of bad, you can put some salt on it, but salt is also very expensive. Bai Shan said, "I knew this venison was so good, it's up to us to treat the guests." Man Bao nodded, and when she turned her head, she saw Xiang Mingxiu sitting on the chair also looking up at the deer legs hanging under the eaves. She said, "Your wound is healed, you can eat this now, or at night stewed venison. Fried diced is also good. Bai Shan, and the braised sauce. The sauce that my brother brought back last Friday was pretty good. It must be delicious to co-author the braised sauce." The two of them swallowed again. Xiang Mingxiu, he didn't say anything. But he glanced at his feet and nodded. His wounds have healed, and he was lucky. He only had a low-grade fever for 2 days in the middle. Because he had been taking medicine, the inflammation quickly disappeared, and the fever also subsided. After the tingling process, the scars quickly scabbed and fell off, but he still uses medicine every day, which is said to activate the muscles and bones, allowing them to grow and heal faster. According to Man Bao, he will be able to start rehab after a while. Xiang Mingxiu didn't say anything, but he was actually very nervous. After all, he was the first person in history to be able to pick up a hamstring after being picked. I don't know if it will survive. Imperial Dr. Lu and Imperial Dr. Zheng have both visited him, and they didn't say whether it was okay or not, but he seemed to be confident when he saw Man Bao, and he felt more confident. The reason why Man Bao is so confident is because the recovery effects of the 3 anthropomorphic models in the system are all good, and the lowest one has a survival rate of 60%. According to the input rehabilitation data, it should be able to recover to 70% in the end, which means that the patient there are flaws, but walking is fine. Not to mention, the survival rate of one of them reached 85%. Man Bao felt that Xiang Mingxiu's surgery did not feel worse than being an anthropomorphic model, so his tendon survival rate should not be too low. Especially his recent recovery effect is also good. In a few days, he will be able to try rehabilitation and move slowly. But in fact, the most nervous among Man Bao's patients is not Xiang Mingxiu, nor the prince in the palace, but Han Wu Niang in Li's house. I don't know who told Han Wu Niangzi that her child was not guaranteed, so she had to open her belly to take the child. Therefore, for the past 20 days, I have not come to massage her to correct the fetal position, because it is no longer necessary. When Wu Niangzi heard this, she was anxious and scared, and she was sad and angry, and her fetal chi moved at once. Man Baijian and Bai Shan were eating stewed venison around the stove, and there was a knock on the door of their house. When Man Bao heard it, he immediately grabbed a few more chopsticks and ate pork chops. Bai Shan and the others also felt that the voice was very familiar, so while waiting for someone to report, they put something in her bowl. Eat, I'll accompany you later." Even Mr. Zhuang gave Man Bao a piece of meat. Daji quickly came back to report, "Miss Man, a servant of Li's house, said that Han Wu Niang had fetal gas and might give birth." Thursday Lang was still a little ignorant. "Man Bao, are you still delivering deliveries now? Can you?" Bai Shan coughed lightly and got up with Man Bao. "Brother Thursday, I'll accompany Man Bao to see, you can eat first. Thursday Lang hesitated, wondering if he should follow along. Bai Erlang sat quietly and seemed to see his hesitation, so he explained, Thursday brother, don't go there, you won't be able to get to the backyard if you go, big families have many rules, and adult men are rarely allowed to enter the backyard. Man Bao had already gone back to the house to get the medicine box, and went out with Bai Shan. The servants of Li's house waited at the door with a carriage, and they were in a hurry, but Man Bao and the others did not take his carriage, but the car that Daji drove. The two carriages hurried to the Li house very quickly. When the two of them arrived, Tai Tan and Tai Lu happened to have just arrived. The two imperial physicians had a good relationship with Han Shangju, and they were also familiar with Man Bao. They nodded and said hello to each other before heading to the backyard. At this time, the sky was getting dark, and red lanterns were lit under the corridor. The yard of Han Wu Niangzi was noisy, and people were turning around in the yard. Mrs. Han ran out from the inside with red eyes and saw the imperial doctors, and Zhou Man immediately rushed forward. She was still a little sensible. She did not arrest imperial physician Lu and Lao Tan, but reached out and grabbed Man Bao and cried, Zhou Man. Little lady, go take a look, she's red. The three of them were startled, and hurriedly entered the room. Why did the fetal gas suddenly move? The last time I visited, the fetus was still very stable. When the three entered the room, they saw Wu Niangzi hugging her stomach and crying of pain, tears on her face, and was holding Mammy Han tightly in one hand, asking from time to time, Dad doesn't want me anymore, does he? Don't leave me. Man Bao immediately stepped forward to give her a pulse, but she was startled when she saw Man Bao, and immediately waved her hand to keep her away. Man Bao paused and saw the horror in her eyes, so he stepped back and asked the old Dr. Tan to take the pulse. The old Dr. Tan immediately comforted her softly, don't be afraid, Wu Niangzi, let the old man check your pulse first, where is the pain so bad? Han Wu Niang paused, and looked at the old Dr. Tan in disbelief. The old Dr. Tan smiled and said, Wu Niangzi still remember the old man, I even saw you 2 years ago. Han Wu Niangzi was quiet for a while, and Han Wu Niang quickly took the opportunity to comfort and said, Wu Niangzi, who in this world can love you more than the master and the eldest lady? If you don't even believe the master, who else can you trust? Ah, the servants don't know whose instigation you listen to, but you have to believe that the best thing in this world for you is the master and the eldest lady. Madame Han wiped her tears and said, Wu Niang, what are my father and I doing to harm you? For the child in your womb. But my father does not lack grandchildren. For me, if I kiss my nephew and then kiss my nephew, that's all. If you don't have a biological sister, why can't you understand it? Only then did Han Wuniang stretch out her hand to see the old Dr. Tan. The old doctor calmly nodded to the Dr. Lu and Man Bao, then half closed her eyes and listened to the pulse, and asked her where the pain was, but he was not well. I started to check, so I pondered for a while and said, it's the fetal gas, but don't be afraid, I'll prescribe a dose of fetal protection medicine to see. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1276. After comforting Han Wuniang, the old Dr. Tan turned around and went out, and gave a wink to the Dr. Lu and Man Bao. The two hurried out, and Han Wuniang could only continue to hold her stomach and cry of pain. After going out, the old Dr. Tan said, if the fetal gas is moving, first prescribe a dose of anti-abortion medicine, and let Mrs. Han persuade it. It is best to let Dr. Zhou take a closer look to see if it can be saved, and if it persists. Seeing red, I'm afraid it will be difficult to guarantee. Man Bao glanced out at the already dim night, and when he stretched out his hand, he could see the 5 fingers, but he could only see the 5 fingers in front of him. She frowned and said, "This way you can't open your abdomen at all, at least during the day." Of course, the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu also knew this, nodded and sighed, "Yes, the timing is unfortunate." The old Dr. Tan turned around to prescribe the medicine, showed the prescription to the two of them, and after confirming that there was no problem, let someone take the medicine and boil it. The three of them looked around together and wondered, "Isn't Li Lang Jun at home?" The old mama said, "The third master has dealt with the next person." Old Thai Dr. Tan and Lu Thai Doctor frowned and did not ask any further questions. They were never interested in the private affairs of the inner house. But Man Bao is not. She is very strange. Why is Han Wu Niangzi so afraid of me? Mammy Li hesitated. This. The old Dr. Tan coughed lightly. "Dr. Zhou Xiao, how is your research on anesthesia? I heard Dr. Lu say that you are trying a prescription for Han Wu Niangzi." Man Bao nodded. "It's been tried. It just hasn't been tested on living people." Man Bao looked at Han Wu Niang, who was still crying in the inner room, and thought, "She's probably the first person to use it." Man Bao heard the sound coming from inside, and felt that she seemed to be in pain. After hesitating for a while, he said to Mama Li, "I will use acupuncture to relieve the pain. You go in and ask if Han Wu Niang is willing to pierce it, at least it will make her feel better at this time. Come on, it will take 3/4 of an hour for the medicine to be ready." Mammy Li immediately went in, and Man Bao heard the muttering voices coming from inside. He couldn't hear it clearly, but he could also hear that Mrs. Han and Mammy Han were persuading Fifth Lady Han. Seeing the host's ears pricked up, Keek asked, "Host, do you want me to broadcast it for you?" No need. Although Man Bao wanted to hear it, she was still very moral. She said solemnly, "Listening to someone's corner is an incorrect behavior." Keek didn't say a word, and she couldn't hear anything with her ears closed. Not much work. Mrs. Han came out and invited Man Bao in. Man Bao then nodded with the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu, and went in with the medicine box. Han Wu Niang's face was pale, and she was holding her stomach against the pillow. Because of the pain, her forehead was sweating finely. Seeing Man Bao, she was a little scared and a little angry, so she turned her head to the side. Man Bao wasn't funny either. He touched her pulse before touching Zhang Xiao's face and then touched her stomach. Seeing her flinch, he said, "Don't be afraid, I just want to see how the child is doing." Han Wu Niang tried to lie down with a straight face and let her touch. Man Bao took out the needle bag and gave her a needle to relieve the pain. Within 1/4 of an hour, she felt a little better, and the blood on her face returned. She looked down and saw that Man Bao was still holding a needle and turning it back and forth. Remembering what she heard before dinner, she couldn't help tightening the quilt and asked, "Dr. Zhou, I heard people say, you want to cut open the abdomen for me?" Man Bao looked up at her and didn't answer her directly, but asked, "Han Wu Niangzi, do you think you can give birth to this child?" Wu Niangzi subconsciously reached out and touched her stomach, her face pale. What do you mean by that?" Madame Han on the side couldn't help but stop softly, "Miss Zhou." Man Bao shook his head slightly at Mrs. Han, turned to look at Mrs. Han Wu and said, "I felt bad when I touched your pulse at the time, and even worse after I touched the fetal position, but Mrs. Han and Han Shangshu felt bad. I'm afraid you'll be worried, so don't wait for me to tell you." Han Wu Niang looked at Man Bao blankly. Man Bao softly said to her, "Han Wu Niangzi, you are petite and your pelvis is too small, it is difficult to give birth. This child is still so big, it is even more difficult for you to give birth, and the fetal position is still upside down. You understand me, do you mean? The average pregnant woman gives birth with half a foot in the gate of hell, and you have both feet." Han Wu Niang's face turned pale, and she felt a faint pain in her stomach again, but this was just her illusion, because Man Bao was using acupuncture to protect her from miscarriage and relieve the pain. But the tears on her face were real. She looked at Madame Han at a loss, and when she saw her eldest sister lowered her head, she turned to look at Mammy Han, who was sitting beside her and half hugging her. The older one, who has been reliant on her since childhood, couldn't help but ask, "Mommy, is what she said true?" Mammy Han sighed, hugged her and patted her. "Wu Niangzi, don't listen to those little hooves arguing. Who in this world can love you more than the master and the eldest lady?" Wu Niangzi covered her face and cried, and asked, "Where's Mr. Lang? Where did he go?" Mrs. Han said, "He went to deal with those nonsense servants." "Wu Niang, you are always smart, think about it, those people are telling you this now, is it really for your own good, or do you want to think about it? Harm you?" Han Wu Niang's face changed a bit, she gritted her teeth and asked, "Did Lang Jun provoke people outside?" The two concubines in the mansion did not have the courage, let alone the ability. Madame Han was stunned for a moment and then looked at Man Bao. Man Baijin was enjoying the acupuncture, listening to the gossip by the way, and seeing Mrs. Han looking at her, she blinked, and she reacted with hindsight, "Me." Madame Han coughed lightly and changed the subject, "Miss Zhou, how is my sister?" Man Bao replied stunnedly, "It's okay, drink the anti-abortion medicine, I will supplement it with acupuncture, it will be fine. Is this because of me?" Man Bao thought for a while, then frowned and said, "This is too much, why are those people so bad?" Wu Niangzi also frowned, "What do you mean, what does this have to do with you?" Man Bao immediately reacted, she was the one who wanted to stab Han Wuniang, so she couldn't lose the patient's trust, so she immediately reassured her, "It's okay, it's just that someone wants to harm me, but I didn't expect that they would take my patient from me. It's totally unreasonable to start, but don't be afraid, you are not serious this time, as long as you don't believe the rumors in the future." Wu Niangzi rubbed her stomach and pondered for a moment, then asked, "Dr. Zhou, let's talk straight to the point. I can't give birth to this child. What are you going to do?" Man Bao knew that hiding this matter at this time would only make the patient lose confidence in her, so she explained to her in detail how her abdominal surgery was different from others, and she would try to keep it to the greatest extent possible. Their mother and son. If she can only choose one of the two, she will try her best to keep the mother body. "I'm going to take a shower and go to bed after taking the medicine, so see you tomorrow. I feel much better today, thank you for your concern, I think I should be able to continue adding more tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1277. Han Wu Niang fell silent, and said after a long time, "No, let's take care of the child first." Madame Han shouted in disapproval, "Wu Niang." Wu Niangzi shook her head with red eyes, "Eldest sister, I finally conceived this child. I know that if I can't have a child this time, I won't be able to give birth in the future." Wu Niangzi hugged her stomach and cried, "This is my child who is 8 months pregnant. How can I give up on him?" Madame Han knew that this would be the outcome, so they were reluctant to tell her this. Man Bao quickly reassured her, "Don't worry, Mrs. Han Wu, it's just the worst plan, it doesn't mean that you can only protect one." Wu Niangzi shed tears silently. Li Sanlang came back full of cold air. He stomped his feet outside the screen and waited for the cold air on his body to subside before entering the inner room. Seeing the fifth lady Han was wiping her tears, his face became more and more unsightly. Mrs. Han silently gave him a seat, and Li Sanlang sat by the bed and said with a dark face, "Don't worry, there are me and my eldest sister outside." After speaking, he turned to look at Man Bao and asked politely, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, how is your wife?" Man Bao said, "It's okay, the medicine has already boiled. Let her take a dose of anti-abortion medicine. I'm going to prepare. I'll start cutting around noon tomorrow. By the way, she won't eat from now on." Li Sanlang looked at Mrs. Han, and Mrs. Hanwu hesitated, "Don't you eat anything at all?" Li Sanlang didn't hold back the fire in his heart, he couldn't help but said, "Why don't you eat 2 meals less? If you can be obedient and eat less, why are there so many things?" Hanwu Niang, who just stopped, couldn't help crying again, "You blame me, and you blame me, but is this what I want to eat? This is what your son eats. I don't even have the strength, you all know how to let me eat less, how can I eat less?" The voices of the two were very loud. It was the first time that Man Bao saw a quarrel between a patient and the patient's family members. "June, it's not really Hanwu Niang's fault, she is sick and can't help being hungry." When a few people in the room heard this, they all looked at Man Bao, "Is it sick from eating too much?" Man Bao said, "Yes, isn't this normal? If you eat too little, you will think it's a bad appetite and a disease. Naturally, if you eat too much, you will also be sick." Hanwu Niang asked blankly, "What's the disease?" Man Bao, "This is diabetes." Hanwu Niang looked at Han Ma who was beside her. Mammy Han squinted her old and dim eyes and thought for a while, then asked, "Dr. Zhou, our fifth lady didn't have such a disease before. I heard that diabetes mellitus will lead to excessive drinking, eating, and urination, and the body will lose weight. We Wu Niangza didn't have this before, and the diet was very appropriate." Mammy Li also got in from the outside and nodded again and again, "Yes, yes, the third wife eats too much after she is pregnant, but pregnancy will always be addictive, isn't this normal?" After Hanwu Niangza became pregnant, Li Mo was always taking care of her, so she knew the changes of Hanwu Niangza best. Man Bao said, "Of course it's not normal, other pregnant women eat more and they will gain weight, but look at your wife, except for her belly, her face, hands, and feet have not changed, right? It just happened to be pregnant, so you didn't just found out about the disease." Outside the screen, the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu looked at each other, and they all recalled Hanwu Niangza's pulse case. Indeed, it is a bit strange that her increase in food intake is a bit strange. It's not like the Li family did nothing. After discovering that Wu Niangza didn't listen to her advice and always eat more, her mother-in-law began to let the kitchen control the supplements she took in her mouth. From the 5th month of pregnancy, she ate very little of the several kinds of supplements that nobles often eat during pregnancy. At that time, they didn't pay much attention to this when they asked Mammy Li, but looking at it now, under such circumstances, if it hadn't been controlled at the time, I'm afraid. Man Bao comforted the patient, and after ensuring that the disease would not endanger the child's life, she pulled the needle out of her body before going out. Man Bao, Thai Dr. Lao Tan and Thai Dr. Lu said, "Let's have an autopsy tomorrow." After all, it was the first time that a pregnant woman was in good condition to open her abdomen to take a child. The old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu were still a little nervous. They looked at each other and asked, "Is it too fast?" The old Dr. Tan said, "I can see her pulse. I might be able to save the child with a little effort." Man Bayadao, "I saw it just now, although it's small, but I'm still seeing red. If I don't cut it, she will be lying on the bed for the next month to raise the baby. I'm afraid she won't even be able to move. This is also the case. It's dangerous." Imperial Physician Lu didn't speak, but Imperial Physician Tan sighed and asked, "Is the child mature?" Man Bao paused and said, "I heard just now that the fetal heart rate is faster than before, but it is still within the normal range, but I am still worried." Imperial Physician Lu calculated the time and said, "There are still 8 days before the age of 9 months. The time is short, and the survival rate of the child will not be too high." But the old Dr. Tan said, "The most urgent task is to save Hanwu Niangzi, the child. It's good to take it out alive, and then there will be a way to deal with it." "There is always a choice," he said. Obviously, he is more inclined to listen to Han Shangshi's request. In this era, the survival rate of children born naturally is not high, and even the family of the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu also had children who died. Before the child is 8 years old, it is possible to die due to various reasons, and the old Dr. Tan does not advocate giving up Han Wu Niang's life for a child, unless her chances of surviving are lower than the child's. So he turned his head and asked Man Bao, "How confident is Dr. Zhou Xiao?" "Mother body," Man Bao said, "at this time, the possibility of belly opening is indeed higher, and it is not only bad for the mother body, but also for the child." Man Bao thought for a while, but still poked Keek secretly, "Scan her to see how the child is." Keek unceremoniously deducted a point, and then fed the data back to the anthropomorphic model in the system, so that Man Bao could see it intuitively. Man Bao sat in the chair and closed her eyes, her consciousness sank into the system to watch. She let Keek operate the anthropomorphic model, and let her show a 5D state. She could intuitively see the state of the child in her belly. Man Bao opened her eyes, but the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu just thought she was closing her eyes and resting. Man Bao said, "It's better to cut it tomorrow. It's not good for the child to drag it on." The old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu discussed for a while, then nodded together, and then went out to discuss with Han Shangzhu. Bai Shanzheng, Han Shangzhu and the others were sitting and drinking tea together. When they saw Man Bao and the three of them came in together, they stood up to salute Lao Tai and Lu Tai, and stepped back to listen to them. "Ah, Xiao Fu Nv actually entered the Hall of Fame. I'm so happy. Thank you for your support. The next update will be around 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1278. Even though he had been prepared, Han Shangshu still flinched a little, but it was an open belly to take a child, and the object was still his daughter. Li Shangshu sat on the side and didn't disturb him. This kind of thing can't be persuaded. Because life and death are unknown, all he can do is to say, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, if you need anything, just say it, and I will let the next person take care of it immediately." Man Bao nodded to him, still looking at Han Shangshu. Han Shangshu was silent for a long time, and finally nodded and said, "Young Dr. Zhou is here." Man Bao got up and said, "Then I'll go back first, and come back to the mansion tomorrow morning." Han Shangshu was stunned for a moment, and quickly asked, "Isn't Dr. Zhou Xiao staying at the mansion?" Man Baodao, "The patient also needs to rest, let her sleep after taking the medicine, remember not to let her eat, you can drink a little water, as long as she is no longer stimulated, she will be fine." Han Shangshu looked at the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu. The two imperial physicians looked at the sky outside and nodded and said, "The two of us will disturb the mansion tonight." Li Shangshu said quickly, "The guest room has been prepared for the two imperial physicians." The two ministers glanced at Man Bao, and then at Bai Shan who was waiting, and knew that it was not appropriate for Zhou Man to stay here. After all, she was still a little girl. So Han Shangshu didn't reluctantly and asked, "I don't know what we need to prepare at home." After thinking about it, Man Bao asked someone to take a pen and ink to list, "I will write some medicines for you, all of which will be used tomorrow. You should prepare first, and you have to prepare another well-lit and empty room. You don't need to prepare too many things, just put a bed or a wooden couch." The old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu went up to see the medicines she listed. Seeing that there was a lot of demand for kangzu, they asked, "Do you want to use kangzu to smoke the house?" Man Bao nodded, "The wound on the abdomen may be a little big. Although it's winter now, it's better to be safe." The old Dr. Tan continued to comment, "This amount of anesthesia is too small, will it not be able to be anesthetized?" Dr. Lu said, "Dr. Zhou Xiao also has acupuncture and anesthesia, otherwise the large amount of medicine will have a great impact on the child." The old Dr. Tan nodded, and seeing that there were emergency medicines listed behind her, he felt that he had nothing to add. Man Bao handed the written list to Han Shangshu, and after a few words, said goodbye and left. Han Shangshu hurriedly asked someone to escort them back. Sitting in the car, Bai Shan glanced at the guard behind him from the car window, closed the car window and asked, "Are you sure tomorrow?" Man Bao said, "I think there should be a 90% chance. After all, she has 20 anthropomorphic models based on Han Wuniang's data, and she has simulated other emergencies during this period. As long as she doesn't encounter specific emergencies, she is still very confident." Although he already had experience, Man Bao still prepared well. For example, when he went back in the evening, he talked to teacher Mo, and then he did nothing and lay down on the bed to rest in peace. Early the next morning, she went to Ji Shitang with the medicine box. After De Ji sent Bai Shan and the others to Quazijian, she went to report to shopkeeper Zheng De and asked him and imperial physician Zheng to bring a message. And then took Xiao Xiao to the Li mansion. The missing medicine in the Li family was finally made up from Ji Shitang. Their house vacated a well-lit wing, and according to Man Bao's instructions, he smoked the room with Kangju, and only put a wooden couch and some shelves in it. Not long after, Dr. Lu and Dr. Xiao also came. They received a message from Imperial Dr. Zheng from Man Bao Tuo early this morning and asked for leave to leave the palace. Because Man Bao had told them earlier, had taught them a little bit, and got the queen's approval, it was not difficult for them to leave the palace. Han Wuniang was a little nervous. It should be said that everyone was a little nervous, including the two imperial physicians and Man Bao, but their faces didn't show. Obviously, they have the professional ethics of doctors, and they can't let people see that they are panicking. Han Wuniangza was so nervous that she even forgot to ask for something to eat, and Li Saburo, who had been called hungry by her ear in the morning, breathed a sigh of relief. Man Bao said that it would be noon until noon, but in fact they had everything ready before noon. Man Bao also took out the blood drawing device, and tested the blood on the fingers of several girls found by Han Shangzhu. After confirming the blood types of them and Han Wuniangzi, he drew a jar for use. When Han Shangzhu saw that she was even ready for blood, his heart dropped slightly. He didn't go to court or the Yamen today, but made a special trip to guard here. There were quite a lot of people who came to the yard to watch the excitement. Several of the Li family's lords and wives came over quietly, but under Li Shangzhu's eyes, they didn't dare to disturb the two imperial physicians and Zhou Man, they were just being honest. Stood aside and watched. The female relatives surrounded Han Wuniangzi, no matter whether it was true love or falsehood, anyway, it was just words of consolation that they said as if they didn't want money. Originally Han Wuniang was nervous, so she was even more nervous, she felt a dull pain in her stomach. When Mrs. Han saw it, she immediately changed the subject and sent people aside in 2 or 3 times. Man Bao arranged everything, and the blood was under the control of the old Dr. Tan, while Man Bao and the Dr. Lu stepped forward to feel Han Wuniang's pulse, nodded and said, "Okay, Wuniangzi, do you want to go?" Dressing. Han Wuniang hesitated for a while and then nodded. When she came out of the room, Man Bao led her into the delivery room. 2 huge screens were erected in the delivery room. The wooden couch was inside the screens, and there was a table and 2 chairs outside. Tai Dr. Tan and Tai Dr. Lu sat here and waited. Han Shangzhu didn't come in, but Li Sanlang also stood outside with him, and Mrs. Han changed into a clean dress and entered the screen. The boiled medicine was brought up, Han Wuniang drank it, and Man Bao started to use needles. After more than a quarter of an hour, it was determined that she was asleep, and Man Bao tied a thread to Han Wuniang's hand and pulled it out to the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu. Man Bao had only heard of the pulse diagnosis by hanging wire, but he had never seen it, and he would never have said that the old Dr. Tan said he could. After the 3 were sure that the person had really fallen asleep, Man Bao looked at Dr. Lu and Dr. Xiao, nodded slightly and said, "Let's start." The surgical instruments had already been sterilized. After Man Bao cleaned her hands, she shook it. After the water on her hands was naturally dry, she took out the scalpel, touched her stomach, and calm down. Paddle down. The blood came out, but Mrs. Han stretched out her hand to cover her mouth and didn't cry out. She widened her eyes and watched Joe Man cut her sister's stomach open, and then cut a layer of something, and stopped to look at it. Dr. Lu and Dr. Xiao were also a little nervous, and took the gauze to wipe off the blood that came out, so as not to block Dr. Zhou Xiao's sight. In the end, they were stunned after the two cuts. They saw a big round bag, and they could vaguely see the shape of the child. Their eyes widened, and then they saw Man Bao gently cut a layer of things with a knife, and they could vaguely see the child's feet. The two eyes widened for a while. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1279. Man Bao put down the knife, put his hand in gently, carefully took out the child's foot, then lifted the child out with his foot, and the other hand slipped in skillfully to support the child's neck and head. After a while he was taken out. No one expected it to be so fast. Dr. Lu and Dr. Xiao were stunned for a while. Man Bao glanced at them and said, "What are you doing? Cut the umbilical cord." Before they could move, Wen Po and Li Ma, whose hands and feet were weak, were the first to react. They immediately took the scissors and went forward to cut the umbilical cord with their hands and feet. Mammy Li took a soft cotton cloth and wrapped it around the child. The two immediately carried the child down to wash it, removed the filth on his nose and mouth, and then felt a little helpless while holding the child. At this moment, they should take a picture of the child and announce the good news loudly, but when they turned around and saw that Dr. Zhou was still busy with the fifth lady, they didn't dare to call. But the child obviously felt the change in the environment, and couldn't help but move a little, and then let out a slight cry. Li Sanlang, who was outside the screen, was stunned when he heard the cry of the child. He stiffly turned his head to look at Imperial Physician Lu and Imperial Physician Lao Tan, and asked uncertainly, "Did you hear the child's cry?" Madame Han finally looked away from the wooden couch and looked at Madame Wen and Mammy Li. "Is it a boy or a girl?" Only then did Madame Wen regain her emotions and said happily, "Congratulations, eldest lady, it's a boy." Then she looked at Li Mama, immediately washed the child with warm water, and took it out to Li Saburo in a swaddle. Li Sanlang was stunned. "This, so fast? How long has it been? How is Wu Niangzi?" "This." Mammy Li said, "Third master, we don't understand either, but looking at Dr. Zhou's expression, it seems that he's fine." Mrs. Han also turned her gaze back to the wooden couch. After Man Bao took the child out, she immediately cleaned the placenta. Dr. Lu and Dr. Xiao were also unmarried girls. The trembling helped stop the bleeding, clean up the blood stains. Dr. Xiao's face became paler and paler, and finally she couldn't hold back. She took a step back, put down her things and ran out. After a while, she heard the sound of vomiting from outside. Man Bao raised his head and glanced at Dr. Lu, seeing that although she was also pale, she could stand it, so she continued to lower her head to deal with the matter at hand. After cleaning the placenta and confirming that there were no other problems, Man Bao nodded and said, "Go and get the needle and thread." Dr. Lu immediately turned around to get the needle and thread for the suture. The catgut she used was extremely thin, at least she had never seen such a thin thread before, so she gave it to Man Bao. While threading the thread, Man Bao asked, "Old Imperial Physician Tan?" The old Dr. Tan said, "Nothing, the pulse is still good." Man Bao nodded. She had to suture the uterus first. She stopped to observe and made sure that there was no active bleeding in the uterus, and then began to suture. Dr. Lu held gauze on the side to stop the bleeding in her abdominal cavity. The two slowly cooperated smoothly. Dr. Xiao quickly changed into new clothes and came in. Man Bao said to her, "Go watch the child." Dr. Xiao breathed a sigh of relief, nodded again and again. She didn't need to go forward, she turned to see the child's condition. The child is in the hands of Imperial Physician Liu. He has already checked the child and confirmed that he is a little frail due to premature birth and has no other major problems. At this time, he is watching Granny Wen and Mammy Li wrapping the person tightly in swaddling clothes. Seriously. Outside the screen, Li Sanlang was in a hurry. Why has the child been taken out for so long, and the inside is still not good? And Han Shangshu, who was waiting outside the house, was even more anxious. He also knew that the child was taken out. He could hear the child's cry across the door, but the people inside still didn't move. Only Mrs. Han was able to stand still, because she could see clearly that Zhou Man was stitching up with needles and threads. She thought it was very strange. Can the stomach be sewn up like clothes? Not to mention what's inside. She couldn't help but took 2 steps forward a little, but she still couldn't see clearly. She only saw that she was suturing something like a membrane. Man Bao moved his neck, making the sore neck a little more comfortable, and then continued to work with his head down. After about 3/4 of an hour, she sutured the muscle layer and serosa layer of the uterus, and then she went to suture the abdominal cavity. She carefully sutured the muscles, fascia, etc. separately, and after another 1/4 of an hour, she sutured her abdomen. Madame Han's feet were tired from standing. Dr. Liu's complexion had returned to normal, and she took the medicine and went to work with Man Bao to apply the medicine and bandage her. Only then did she start to clean up the blood on the patient's body. Mammy Li stepped forward with weak hands and feet, and helped Wu Nianghan put on her clothes. After covering the quilt, she couldn't help but reach out to probe her breath when she saw that she was still awake. Man Bao looked at her with a speechless expression. Seeing that she breathed a sigh of relief after snorting, she couldn't help but ask, "How is it? Are you alive?" Mammy Li came back to her senses and smiled at Bao Bao with an embarrassed look on her face. Man Bao smiled and didn't care much. She untied the silk thread on her hand, reached out to touch her pulse and said, "She should wake up in a while, but don't take it lightly right now, let's talk in 3 days." Man Bao turned out of the screen, and Li Sanlang was about to rush in to see her, but Man Bao stopped him slightly. "You can go in, but it's best not to have too many people in this room in the future, and only a few of you will come in and out every day, so as not to contaminate her wounds." Li Saburo listened for a while, and instead of rushing forward to look, he stood on tiptoe and asked, "Is she all right?" "The operation went well, but then you have to be careful not to let her get infected or irritated. The former will inflame and die, and the latter will bleed heavily." Madame Han, who had just glanced at her sister and confirmed that she was indeed still alive, was taken aback and decided to live here at night, lest other people in Li's house crowd in to disturb her for the sake of watching the fun. Although the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu did not see the process of the operation, they listened to the pulse for more than half an hour and decided to call the Dr. Lu and the Dr. Xiao to talk about it later. Man Bao turned around and looked at the child. This was her first child born by caesarean section. She touched his little hand and made sure that there was no major problem, and then withdrew to explain some things to Han Shangshu and Li Sanlang. "She can't eat yet." Thinking of Han Wuniang's thirst, Man Bao hesitated for a while and said, "Forget it, I'll stay here at night to see if she can exhaust her gas at night." Han Shangshu breathed a sigh of relief, and quickly "Thank you Miss Zhou." Man Bao said, "She'd better not have any more pregnancy in the future. Caesarean section is very harmful to the mother's body, and she wants to give birth naturally. In terms of her physical condition, it is very difficult." Han Shangshu looked at his son-in-law. Li Sanlang immediately confessed, "I won't give birth, I will persuade her when she recovers." One birth would cost him his old life, but he would not dare to do it a second time. In this case, the child is very important, and Han Shangshu immediately went to get close to the old Dr. Tan. See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1280. Man Bao carefully washed her hands, and then untied the towel wrapped around her head. Because it was a little tight, there was a light mark on her forehead, and her hair was torn to pieces. Dr. Lu just took off the towel, and when she saw it, she said, "Dr. Zhou, let me comb your hair for you." Man Bao likes others to comb his hair the most. It is not only comfortable but also good looking, so he nodded again and again. Mrs. Han finally reacted, and immediately asked them to take them to the guest room to rest and freshen up. Dr. Lu obviously hadn't recovered much from the operation. While combing Man Bao's hair slowly, she asked, "Dr. Zhou, how did you come up with the idea of opening the abdomen to take the child?" She had a very strange feeling that Zhou Man's operation had been done many times, and it didn't seem like the first time. For example, the skillful posture of pulling the child out, the careful stitching layer by layer. If you haven't done it before, who knows how to do it? She had seen a lot of things in the imperial hospital, especially when it was inconvenient for the imperial physicians to see the masters of the harem, and they needed to check and tell them on their behalf. Moreover, girls have a very special kind of carefulness. Dr. Xiao may have been frightened and did not pay attention, but she has seen it from the beginning to the end. Man Bao said, "If you sew more, you will know." She turned her head to look at half of the hair she had combed, and said, "In fact, it is better to give birth naturally, because the tools are limited, postpartum care is difficult, and caesarean section is very harmful to the mother's body. Unless absolutely necessary, caesarean section is not recommended in the future." Dr. Lu nodded, but Dr. Zhou Xiao has pioneered this treatment. In the future, there will be women who have dystocia, and they will have another way to survive. Man Bao looked at her face through the bronze mirror and asked, "Do you want to learn?" Dr. Lu was stunned, and after a while, she asked in surprise, "Can I learn?" Man Bao nodded and said, "There are many prejudices in the world. If you look at the Han family's favorite Han Wu Niangzi, the Li family is also open-minded, but the old Dr. Tan and the others can only wait outside the screen, not to mention other people's families." She sighed, "The capital is not bad, there are more ignorant people in other places. I have seen mothers-in-law who would rather let their daughter-in-law die in childbirth than ask a doctor to take a look, so it is more convenient for a female doctor to give birth." Dr. Lu didn't immediately agree to her, but after thinking for a while, she said, "But in this way, won't I become a stable mother in the end? How many people in this world need to open their abdomens to get children? And I don't have any. I am confident that I can do what Dr. Zhou Xiao did." Man Bao smiled and said, "You can not only learn how to open the abdomen, but also learn how to give birth naturally. You can also learn other medical skills. You are not just for delivering babies. You can look at other diseases." She said, "Look at the patients who come in and out of Ji Shitang every day. Among the 10 people, 5 are underage children, 4 are men, and only 1 is an adult woman. This is because I went to Ji Shitang to stabilize. Only these few female patients came down, and in the past, the huge Ji Shitang might not see a single female patient a day." Dr. Lu did not expect this. Man Bao said calmly, "Is it true that women's bodies are better than men's and won't get sick? No, maybe it's because of poverty, maybe because of the difference between men and women. Women are more tolerant than men, endure pain, endure illness, just rely on themselves to endure past. But if there are female doctors among the doctors sitting in the pharmacy, then they will be less patient, and those who can afford the disease will always come to see them." Man Bao raised his eyes and looked into Dr. Liu's eyes through the bronze mirror. "Your family has practiced medicine for generations. If you are willing, you can definitely learn other medical skills. At that time, you can sit in the hall to practice medicine." Dr. Lu didn't speak for a long time. She combed Man Bao's hair and inserted the bead flowers, and then said with a complicated expression, "Dr. Zhou, I'm 17, and in 2 years, the family will tell me. Dear, and then take me out of the palace to marry. I can't sit in the hall to see a doctor after marriage, right? Man Bao asked, why not? The family wealth of the imperial doctor was not as much as Man Bao thought. At least it was necessary to maintain a living in the capital. It was not easy to support a family. She knew that the dowry that the Lu family could give to Lu Yi's daughter would not be much. If none of Liu's grandsons can enter the hospital, they will eventually have to leave the capital and go back to their hometowns, buy some fields, become an ordinary rich man, maybe open a pharmacy, or find a local pharmacy to continue. Sit down as a doctor. It also depends on the ability of the descendants. Imperial Dr. Lu is one of the imperial physicians that Man Bao is most familiar with, so she and the shopkeeper Zhengda have learned that, among the imperial physicians, his family background is the weakest. And grandchildren are not particularly outstanding at the moment. On the contrary, it was Dr. Lu, and Man Bao admired her very much. Dr. Lu fought for a while, and then whispered, my grandfather will not pass on the medical books at home to me. Some of the more important diseases, even my father has not learned it, only my uncle can learn it. Man Bao said, it's okay, I can teach you. Have you read the Yellow Emperor's internal classic? Dr. Lu nodded, I have seen this, but there are many puzzles. Go back and sort it out, and I'll answer you one by one. Man Bao still felt a little pity. Unfortunately, it's not convenient for you to be in the palace, otherwise you will be auscultating beside me like Xiao Xiao, and the speed will definitely be faster. After all, she has also worked in the hospital for so many years. Although she has read few medical books, she must have seen a lot of diseases and prescriptions, but unfortunately, she has not studied systematically, and I don't know why, so she is not good at diagnosing the pulse and prescribing the prescription. But Man Bao felt that as long as she was taught this, she would grow faster than Xiao Xiao. Man Bao is a pity. Man Bao turned his head and felt that her hair was pretty good looking, so he got up and let her sit down. You can also wash up. Dr. Lu responded, brushing her hair and asking, Dr. Zhou Xiao, do I want to stay to watch with you at night? Man Bao blinked, his eyes met her, and asked with a smile, do you want to stay? Dr. Lu paused for a while and then gave a soft Man Bao smiled and said, then you can stay. This is just a matter of Man Bao's words. As long as she tells Imperial Dr. Lu and the Li family that she wants to keep Dr. Liu's helper, someone will naturally ask for leave for Dr. Lu and the Imperial Hospital. Dr. Xiao came out from the old Dr. Tan, and when Wu Nianghan woke up, there was no big problem with the old Dr. Tan and the Dr. Lu. After the people were still alive, they left with them. She has to go back to the palace. Man Bao wrote a letter to Xiao Xiao and asked him to go to Changqing Lane after returning to Ji Tang. Tell my family, I have to stay here tonight and go home tomorrow. Small peony should go down. Man Bao washed his hands and entered the delivery room, glanced at the waking up Han Wu Niang, and then stretched out his sinful little hand and pressed her abdomen. It's been a whole year. It's amazing to think about it. Last year, how could I send out the chapters I wrote at night? I don't know what I was thinking at the time. Okay, today's update is here. Happy anniversary everyone. Thank you for your continued support, I love you.